Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Branch Cache, and in this video, we're going to be talking about a nifty feature that is in Server 2008 R2 and Windows 7 that's going to help your branch offices from stop bleeding bandwidth and also make your users happy. So this is kind of some cool stuff in this video. First of all, we're going to talk about how you can stop the bleeding of your bandwidth, especially if you're connecting your branch offices to your main corporate campus via a slower WAN link. And so we'll talk about what that might look like and the results of that. Then we're going to talk about two methods of implementing branch cache. And one is more secure and available than the other. However, we're going to be doing the easy implementation of branch cache in this video. That we're going to be looking at the cooperative, or also known as the distributed branch cache methodology, where we're actually going to have the clients doing most of the work. And we'll talk about what that will look like. Let's go ahead and get into this idea of having a branch office and what it might mean if your users are having a slower time getting their files. So in a standard regular old branch office network, chances are here's what's happening. Whenever a user requests a file, or let's say three users requesting the same file, well, what ends up happening is that one user requests the file. Okay, nice. It gets downloaded from the main office over the slower WAN link, and they get it, all right? No big deal. It might take a while, though, because oftentimes WAN links are slower than straight-in links. Well, let's say another user requests the same file. Well, that file has to be downloaded again from the main corporate office, again, taking a slower time to get there. And then, of course, if we have a third user requesting the same file, then the same thing happens. We have to use bandwidth over the WAN link to grab that same file. Well, that seems kind of superfluous. We're starting to bleed bandwidth here if users are requesting the same file over and over and over again. Or maybe even it's a web page, or maybe it's an intranet page, or whatever it may be. Why continue to have our users go back to the main source when what we can really do is we can implement a branch cache methodology. Now, branch cache, what it allows us to do is allows us to have one user download the file once, but instead of the second user having to go back to the main corporate office and use more bandwidth, well, we can just simply cache the file on one client machine, and then the second user can grab that same file from the first client. And the second user is actually going to have a faster download experience because the file is already over on the local branch office LAN, so they're going to have an even shorter time and a much better experience than the first user. And then again, if we have a third user, same thing can happen. They can grab it from the second user or the first user, whichever one, because the client machines have cached that file, and they simply grab a copy from the client cache. Kind of neat, huh? So what we're doing here is we are saving bandwidth going back and forth from the main campus to the branch office. And we are also giving our second, third, fourth, or however many other users we have a better download experience because it doesn't take nearly as long to pull the same file or web page or whatever it might be from another client on that branch office LAN. So kind of a neat thing. By the way, this is the implementation that we're going to be doing in the demonstration section of this video. Branch cache also has a hosted method, and it works similarly to our co-op method we just covered, but let me give you the rundown of how this works. Now, first of all, the hosted methodology requires that you have a Server 2008 R2 machine already over on your branch office. I know, kind of a duh statement, right? But this file server, and by the way, this file server could also have other functionalities. It might be a read-only domain controller or something like that. Any number of things that you might have over in a branch office. But this separate file server, what he's going to do is he's going to basically cache the files that are downloaded by the clients. Let me show you how this works. Let's say that client number one goes ahead and requests their file. Well, client number one is going to go ahead and download the file. It's going to take just a little bit longer. He's going to have maybe a slower download time than everyone else that's going to request that file too. But then the client goes ahead and offers that file that just got downloaded over to the file server that's on this particular branch office location. And then the next client that actually requests that file, now it's going to request, of course, from our primary content server over on the main campus. But if branch cache is enabled, then our branch cache server can actually go ahead and simply deliver the cached copy over to the second client that requests it. Now, initially, you might be thinking, well, why don't we just do the co-op method? Well, you can. However, the co-op methodology, I would recommend that for a smaller office. Now, Microsoft says you can use the co-op methodology or the client methodology with 50 users or less. Now, I'm going to recommend, probably 5 to 10 users, maybe 15. But if you really want solid reliability and availability for your files using this branch cache methodology for a larger number of users, you'll probably want to utilize the hosted methodology versus the co-op methodology, just to provide your users with a better experience. Because, that's what Microsoft is really all about with this whole branch office stuff that it keeps coming up with. They're trying to provide an opportunity for companies who are growing and who are expanding into branch office types of scenarios to provide a good user experience for their users over in that branch office. Now, implementing branch cache isn't that difficult, so this is how we do it. First, you install branch cache on your file server that's back on your primary corporate network. Now, by the way, you can also install branch cache on a web server. Now, this is important because if you have an intranet, your users can actually have a better intranet experience using this whole branch cache strategy over on their local branch office network. So just one of those things that you want to keep in mind in case you do have a slow WAN link over to one of your branch offices. This can be implemented on a web server as well. Then what you're going to do once you have branch cache installed, you do have to configure branch cache. You have to basically enable it, all right? Using local group policy, if you have a group of servers that are going, or maybe you have a group of file servers that are in different branch office locations, you can also use a regular GPO, and you also can enable branch cache using the registry. Now, of course, if you're not comfortable enabling it on the registry, the best solution is probably going to be a local group policy setting, and you don't have to get in and start messing around with the brain of your server. And in my opinion, I think enabling a local GPO is probably easier and faster for most of us. So that's another way we can do it. Now, after we have our server configured properly, we need to make sure that any shared folders that we want the branch office users to have access to are branch cache enabled. And let me tell you, this is super simple. It's literally a checkbox. Okay, and I'll show you that checkbox here coming up real soon. And then last, what we need to do is we need to also configure any client machines that are going to be utilizing branch cache. This is going to be most easily accomplished using a group policy object. Okay? And also, we also need to set up a firewall exception to allow the branch cache function to be allowed through the firewall. Right? This is going to be very important. And also, I do want to mention here real quick that branch cache can only be used via SMB protocol or HTTP, okay? Or I should say also HTTPS, because if you have the hosted solution available to you, if you have an extra server lying around for a branch office, you can actually utilize certificate services and apply a certificate so that your branch cache connections are also encrypted. So one of those things that you want to keep in mind in case this is something that you do want to implement in a branch office scenario. But for the time being, what we're going to do is we are going to be implementing this co-op methodology. It's the fastest and easiest to implement, but it's not the most powerful. In order to get the most power out of branch cache, you should probably use a hosted solution. But in the scenario that I have with the machines that I have, I'm going to walk you through the steps of setting up the branch cache server on a file server. I'm going to show you how to configure a GPO for the required settings for branch cache to operate on the clients. Now, since everything that you know that I'm doing is all on this one particular Hyper-V server, we won't really have a solid simulation of what it would look like for branch cache to operate. but you will learn the basic core foundational techniques that will allow you to implement branch cache if in fact you want to do that wherever you may be. All right, so let's go ahead and move on over to the server and let me walk you through the steps. All right, so here we are over on the Hyper-V server, and what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be using the file services rollout. This was set up, as you know, from the very beginning of the course. And here in Share and Store Management, let's go in, let's take a look and see what shares we do have that we could actually configure for branch cache usage. I think I'm just going to go ahead and use the ISO folder. You can use whatever folder you want. It doesn't really make any difference. You just have to make sure that you have some kind of shares on some file server or even a web server that you'll be able to utilize your branch cache for. So let's go ahead and get this part started. Let's go up to here, File Services. What we need to do is we need to go to Role Services. Let's scroll down here just a little bit. And we need to add a role service to our file services. And here it is, the branch cache for network files. We just simply put a check mark in the box there for it, and we hit Next and Install. Doesn't look like any restart is necessary, so bonus. So we're good for that. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and click on Close. And what we need to do next in order to make branch cache available is we can't just leave it right here, okay? We can't just simply install the feature. We also need to go into local group policy and enable it. And I tell you what, I'm just going to go ahead and go into the MMC here, and we'll add in the snap-in for, oh, wait, look. The snap-in for local computer policy is already added in. Okay. Hey, by the way, let me show you just where to go find this real quick in case this is new to you. You go to File, Add, Remove Snap-in, and you scroll down here and click on Group Policy Object. You simply add it over here and then you hit OK, right? But I've already added it because I was messing around with this before, and so here it is. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into Computer Configuration. We'll go into Network Setting here. Now, initially, you're going to want to jump right here to branch cache, right? No, that's not what we're going to do. We need to go here to LAN/MAN server. And you see here we have this hash publication for branch cache setting. Double click to open this guy up. And what we're going to do is we're going to enable the hash publication for branch cache. Now we have three options here. We can allow hash publications for all shared folders. That just takes every one of your shared folders on this file server and allows it to be used via branch cache. Neato, this is probably going to be the one you're going to select instead. Allow hash publication only for shared folders on which branch cache is enabled. This gives you more control in terms of who gets to use what in your branch office. So let's go ahead and select that one. Oh, and by the way, there's also one more, disallow hash publication. We could turn off all shared folders and restrict any of the shared folders from being used via branch cache. Don't want to do that. We're going to go ahead and only allow the ones for shared folders on which we specify branch cache to be enabled for. All right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to tell that one OK. And that's all that we need to do for this one. Now, initially, let me take you over here to branch cache. These are all your basic client settings. All right, so we don't need to turn any of these on at this point in time. Since this guy is really going to be acting as our on-premises file server that we're using to distribute files to the branch office, this is really all we need to do, at least at this stage in the game. Now, what we need to do next is I'm going to go ahead and minimize this guy. Now, what we need to concern ourselves with next is, of course, the configuration of the client machines, and we need to go in and make an alteration to the firewall as well as to the registry entries. But let's first go into our Hyper-V manager next, and we'll start there. What we're going to do is we're going to move on over to our R2, and we're going to go into group policy here, and we're going to actually configure a policy for a particular OU that has the machines in. Now, we have that app restricted clients folder that we created for our one Windows 7 client. I'm just going to go ahead and create a brand new group policy object for this branch cache feature. And we're just going to call this guy branch cache. And I'm not going to use any starter GPOs. I'm just going to go ahead and tell it OK. Let's go ahead and maximize this guy so it's a little easier to use. All right, so App Locker and Branch Cache are both linked to the App Restricted Clients OU. And so let's go ahead and let's right-click on Branch Cache and hit Edit. And what we're going to do is we're going to enable these machines to utilize Branch Cache. Now, of course, in a production environment, what you're going to probably be doing if you're implementing a branch office scenario and going to use Branch Cache is you're going to have an organizational unit that contains all of the computer accounts for your branch office. Okay, so we're going to pretend that our apps restricted machines are actually in the branch office for the time being. We're going to go into policies underneath computer configuration here. And we're going to go to pretty much the same place that we did when we were over on the local group policy settings on our server. We're going to go to administrative templates. We're going to go to network. And this time we are going to go to branch cache. So first of all, we need to turn on branch cache. That's always a good idea. We'll double click on this guy to open him up. Now we're just going to go ahead and enable the branch cache on this machine, or on all the machines that this particular policy applies to. And if you want to read the description on the settings, I'll let you do that on your own. We'll tell that guy OK. That will turn on branch cache, and now we have two options. We're going to either turn on branch cache on in distributed cache mode, which is where we have our clients doing most of the work, right? We don't have a separate additional file server over on our branch office. We're just going to utilize the branch cache distributed mode. We will turn it on, and notice here it is saying that we need to have at least Windows Vista over on the machines in the branch office. So, which I got to tell you, I don't know really why it says that, because Vista doesn't support branch cache. You can really only use branch cache at this stage, at least at the time of this recording, on Windows 7. So just so you know, if you do have Vista machines out there, branch cache is not going to play with it. Now, we might see in a service pack eventually with Vista, we might see branch cache supported, but right now, at the time of this recording, we do not. We'll tell that one OK. Now, we're obviously going to be skipping the branch cache hosted cache mode altogether for this one. Now, this next policy, configure branch cache for network files, this actually allows you to determine which network files will actually be cached on your local client. So we could enable this and specify anything that's above 80 milliseconds, then if it takes at least 80 milliseconds to transfer over, if we have that amount of latency between the beginning of transmission and the end result, then we would automatically cache that particular file. Anything under that, we would not cache. Now, if you want all your network files to cache, you would set it to 0. Okay? And that would allow all of the files that are cacheable to be cached on your client machines. Now, if you want to disable this altogether, you just set this super duper high, at which point none of your files would be cached at all. This is kind of optional. In all honesty, we don't have to enable this, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel that guy out. It just gives you a little bit more control over which files do actually get cached. All right, now this last setting here, set percentage of disk space used for client computer cache. We can open this guy up. Let's go ahead and enable this guy for just a second. What we can do is we can say, okay, you know what? I want 5% of my disk space on my client machines to be able to be used for cached files. 5% is probably fine. 5% of your total disk usage, that's what's set as default. So this is another one of those optional settings. You can enable this if you want to be able to use 10% of your client hard disk space for cached files. You can set it to 10, set it to 5, you can set it to 20 if you want. If you are caching very large files, I suppose you could. I would say that if you're going to initially implement branch cache in your branch office, see how it goes. Leave this one turned off initially, and if the performance isn't as high for your users, if you're getting a lot of help desk complaints and calls about You know how it goes. Then go ahead and implement this particular setting. Otherwise, go ahead and leave it set to the default, which is 5%. You don't even have to configure it. But this guy you have to configure for your client. This guy or this guy you have to configure for your client, depending upon if you're using a distributed or co-op mode, as you might hear it called also for your branch cache, or if you have a hosted cache over on your local branch office environment, then you'd go ahead and enable this guy. All right, so our next setting that we need to configure for our branch cache policy object here, let's go ahead and minimize our administrative templates items here. We're done with those guys. We need to go into Windows settings next. And now we need to go into security settings. And now down here to Windows firewall. You kind of can't see it very well here. Let's go ahead and stretch this guy out here just a little bit. There we go. Let's go ahead and expand this one, and we're going to go into our Windows firewall with advanced security settings. And we're going to first go here to inbound rules. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new rule here. And so we'll click on this guy by right-clicking. So we'll click on that guy. And there we go. All right, we're going to go to the predefined rules. We get to utilize this if we're using Windows 7, just so you know. If you're not using Windows 7, you'll need to specify a particular port. You'll have to go to Microsoft to look up that particular port. But since I'm going to assume that you're using Windows 7, we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the branch cache options here. Now there's two settings that we actually need to utilize. And the first one is content retrieval, where we're actually using HTTP. We would initially go ahead and set up, especially if you're using distributed or the co-op method. So we'll go ahead and we'll specify that guy. And we're going to make sure that it exists. That'll be fine. We'll leave it set at the defaults. We'll tell it next. We're going to, of course, allow the connection. And if we're using host-based caching, then we would actually only allow the connection if it is secure. But we're going to go ahead and leave it set to allow the connection for HTTP connections. And there we have our first rule. We need one more rule, though. Let's go ahead and right-click again, go to New Rule, and we'll go to the Predefined section. Isn't that nice that they put the predefined sets of rules for branch cache into R2 and Windows 7? We're going to specify peer discovery. All right, so we're going to go ahead and specify peer discovery. This is going to allow our clients, again, to talk to each other, figure out who has what file, and before we go back on over to the main file server at our main corporate network, we're going to first look for files in each one of our client machines. So we're going to do that first. We'll go ahead and tell it OK. We're going to allow the connection, and we'll tell it to finish. And voila, that's all we need to do. So creating these group policy objects in these particular settings, this is what is going to make utilizing branch cache very easy for us. Now, of course, you could specify all of this stuff on the local computer policy, but why? The only reason why you're going to use local computer policy on the server is that if you're going to be configuring one file server to be used for your branch cache machines, your clients, then it doesn't make any sense to create an entire group policy object, a new OU for that one particular file server. Just do it in that one local computer policy. Now, if you have multiple file servers, on the other hand, that you're going to be using with branch cache for your branch office users, then you would take all of your branch cache file servers, put them in an OU, and create a group policy object with the same settings for the LAN, MAN, and hash publication, right? So you do the exact same thing that I did for the local computer policy. You would just do it in a GPO for an organizational unit. All right, so we're pretty much finished with this particular setup. Let's go ahead and close out of our group policy management editor. And that will, of course, apply to our clients in this app restricted clients folder. Now, of course, when you're putting this into production, this can apply to whatever OU that you would have for your particular client machines. Let's go ahead and minimize our DCR2, because now there's one more thing that we need to do before branch cache is fully implemented. And of course, we need to specify which folders are actually going to be used in branch cache, which are actually enabled for branch cache. Let's go ahead and right-click on that ISO folder that we took a look at the very beginning of this particular video. We'll go into its properties. and we're going to go into the advanced settings. Here in the advanced settings, we have this caching tab. Let's take a look in the caching tab. Now, we are specifying that only the files and programs that users specify are available offline are going to be used in branch cache. Now, the question is, do you want to specify all files and programs that users open from the share are automatically available offline? Well, that I don't know. That you'll have to decide on your own. But here, when you specify branch cache enabled, you're going to basically enable it for this particular share. We're going to tell it OK and OK. Now, of course, all of your NTFS and share level permissions are still going to apply to this folder. So even when users are attempting to access a particular file or folder from the corporate network file server, even if one user in your branch office is able to get to it, if another user does not have permissions, the user that does not have permissions will still not be able to access the file, even though it's branch cache enabled. So I did want to assure you of that. All right, so at this point in time, it's not going to make a lot of sense in order to demonstrate any further, because all of our machines are on this one particular Hyper-V machine. So we're not going to really see any enhanced download time or bandwidth, because all the bandwidth is on this one machine. But you do now know the process and procedure that you'll need to go through for both your server, your file server that is, for your main corporate premises, and your client machines that happen to live over in a branch office location. And so with that, I think we're just going to go ahead and bounce on over to the slides and wrap this one up. Alright, so after watching this video, you should be able to identify the problem of bandwidth bleed and slow download times in a branch office scenario. You should be able to describe the advantages of using branch cache if you do have that kind of scenario working. I've shown you how to install the branch cache role service on Server 2008 R2. Now, the stuff that got a little more tricky is when we actually went into the local group policy on your file server and we enabled branch cache, right? Remember, we have to go to LAN man. Don't jump straight to that branch cache folder on the server. That's not where you go. Those are your client settings. The server settings is in that LAN man folder that we saw earlier in the video. After we get that set up, we should also be able to enable branch cache on client machines in a particular organizational unit by using a group policy object. Also, don't forget about creating the rule for your client firewall in that same GPO as your branch cache settings. So make sure that you're doing that as well. And then last but not least, I showed you how to enable branch cache on specific files and folders. And of course, we're really looking at a share, so any files that happen to be in that folder that we specify branch cache on will automatically inherit that branch cache ability. All right, so we found out that this wasn't that hard, right? I mean, there's a couple of little weird things you have to remember when you're setting this up, but it doesn't take that long, and as always, everything's easy when you know how to do it. That's it for this one. I'll see you in the next video.